Her true story from Georgia. My son said, "She needs me more than you," on Christmas, and left me for his sick mill. Then I saw their beach photos from Hawaii. One text, and she called me sobbing within the hour. "You're used to being alone anyway," she said with a smile that cut deeper than anything. "A worm should know to find its own leaf. Don't go looking in someone else's nest, or you'll get eaten." Christmas Eve was always mine. I had held on to it for years. Through my husband's cancer, through job losses, family moves, births, deaths, broken bones, and burned turkeys. Somehow, no matter what the year threw at us, I had always managed to bring everyone back home, to my table, for this one night. Just one night. So when I walked into the dining room with the pumpkin pie still steaming in my hands, my heart swelled with something soft. I had baked it from scratch, the way my mother had taught me. I even used the same pan, chipped at the edge, but it held memory like no fancy one could. The lights were twinkling, the garland framing the mantel, Nat King Cole playing in the background. It smelled like cinnamon, clove, and the kind of hope you only allow yourself to feel when you think, maybe this year will be different. My son Daniel stood up abruptly from his chair. I remember his napkin was still on his lap. "Mom," he said, grabbing his coat, "we're headed to help my wife's mother. She needs us more than you." I blinked. The pie trembled slightly in my hands. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, didn't even look up from her phone. "You're used to being alone anyway," she said with a smile that cut deeper than anything. "A worm should know to find its own leaf. Don't go looking in someone else's nest, or you'll get eaten." They both laughed. Not a mean laugh. Worse, a casual one, like they were talking about the weather. I stood there, still holding that pie, feeling the warmth leach out of the room. Daniel didn't even glance back as he opened the door. I watched them walk out with the kind of certainty that only people with somewhere else to be could carry. No apology, no hesitation, just a door closing behind them and silence blooming in its wake. The dining room was still. The candles flickered, the glasses were full, the napkins folded. No one moved to fill their seats. My hand trembled slightly as I set the pie down. I noticed then, for the first time, how deeply the lines around my hands had grown. I used to be proud of them. Signs of work, of love. Tonight, they just looked empty. I sat down slowly, alone at the head of the table. I had set it for 6. There were 5 empty seats. The only sound was the soft clinking of ornaments against the pine needles. I looked at their plates. The name cards I had written in gold ink. Daniel, Rachel, Sophie, Eli. All still there, all untouched. I was not angry. Not yet. I was something quieter. A kind of hollow that rings if you touch it too fast. The lights above the table dimmed slightly, and in their flicker I saw not failure, but awakening. I had loved my son with a mother's fullness. I had helped raise Rachel when she needed help finishing school. I had babysat when they were too busy to care for their own kids. I had done it all, and asked for nothing but their presence on this one day. And they gave me absence, wrapped in cruelty. I leaned back into the chair slowly, not to rest, to root myself. I looked around the table not as a place of mourning, but as a place of truth. What I had built was real. What they had chosen was realer. I reached for my wine, took a sip, and swallowed the last of my illusions. I would not bake another pie for people who walked away without a glance. I would not keep plates warm for people who had grown cold. I would not pretend this was a misunderstanding. It was a message, loud, clear, deliberate. I heard it, and I would remember it, not with bitterness, but with precision. Because tonight wasn't the end of my story. It was the end of theirs, in mine. I remember standing at the kitchen window in 1983, cradling our newborn son against the harsh glare of fluorescent hospital lights. My husband, Tom, had just returned home from the night shift at the mill. His exhaustion was etched in his features when he quietly asked, "Did she eat?" I had cooked oatmeal, mashed bananas, enough for a toddler's rumple. I held my breath as he approached, worried I'd made it too runny or too sweet. But he nodded. Perfect. He cupped our son's face with a gentle hand, and I watched relief and pride passing between them. During the years that followed, I washed the sheets soaked in vomit after fevers. I learned to mix medicines for a toddler with asthma, one hand steadying her, the other dialing our doctor. I patched torn pants after recess fights, washed marker graffiti off the walls, and listened to every triumph and heartbreak, as if it were my own. When our daughter-in-law, Rachel, came into our lives, college sweet and stuffed with promise, I put aside ambivalence to send her to university. I drove miles for campus tours, opened extra accounts during her first semester, and helped navigate financial aid. I saw her as family before she even wore our name. I never asked for repayment, only their gratitude, something I believed would flow naturally in time. But all that care, all that devotion, remained invisible the night of the Christmas Eve when they walked away. When my mother-in-law, Edna, became ill, I took on the burden as if it were my own. She had never warmed to me. Initial glances shot like darts, but when cancer surfaced, she became fragile overnight. I stepped in, doctor visits, hospital check-ins, making sure her pillows were fluffed just right. I remember softly singing her name in the middle of the night, rubbing her forehead when fever broke. Often, I stayed at her home to ease the transition between nurses. How many times did she call me daughter when fever faded to lucidity? More times than she'd ever called me DVL. I never kept count. I just showed up. Those hours, those days, overlapped with daughter-in-law tuition, with parenting newborns, with being every problem life threw at me. Rising before dawn, sleeping well after midnight, I was the backbone they built dreams on me. Yet on Christmas Eve, the kindness I once extended was returned with cold disregard. In quiet moments, I liked to remind myself of who I was, not merely a mother, not merely a wife, a woman who built a family from scratch, a woman who poured every drop of love she had into their success, a woman who stitched the fabric of their stories, even when it went unremarked. I had loved wholeheartedly and with nothing asked in return. Yet tonight, their actions whispered that my love was disposable. I reached for a glass of cold water and leaned against the kitchen counter. Neon light from the fridge cast a pale evening glow through the room. I closed my eyes, felt the chill steel of the counter beneath my palm, and took a long, steadying breath. In that moment, a gentle voice inside me said 2 words, "I deserve better." And late that night, I whispered a quiet affirmation to myself in the dim silence, "I am worth more than this." I did not know what would come next, but I felt, with unwavering certainty, that I would not return to being invisible. Not tonight. Not ever again. I saw the notification flare up on my phone, a small red dot asking to be opened. It was Instagram, from Rachel. I hadn't looked at my phone in days. After last week's Christmas, I'd locked it away so the pain couldn't find me that easily. But there it was, demanding my attention. With a quiet exhale, I tapped the app. The photo hit me like a blow. There they were, Daniel and Rachel, standing at the shore of a sun-drenched beach. Turquoise water lapped at their ankles, sunlight danced off the waves, and both of them grinned with careless joy. The sort of joy that looked nothing like grief or duty, nothing like concern for an ailing mother. The caption, and oh, the cruelty of it, read, "Hawaii, Xmas with Mom." A laugh escaped me, bitter and hollow. I sank to the couch, phone pressed to my chest. The photo glowed defiantly on the screen. Rachel's straw hat tilted just so. Daniel's arm draped around her shoulder, the tips of palm leaves framing their faces like a postcard. I could hear the surf, smell the salt air, feel the warmth that had drowned out the chill of abandonment. And I heard their voices again. "She needs us more than you. A worm should feel lucky to even be invited here." Their words echoed, amplified by the emptiness inside me. For years, I'd baked for holidays, ironed clothes, made every phone call, every school lunch, held every fevered cheek. I had been the rock, the bedrock of our family, and they repaid me with absence, with shame and betrayal and Hawaiian sunshine. The world grew cold around me. The Christmas tree lights, once cozy, now felt gaudy, out of place. The room was too bright, too big. I dropped my head into my hands. The phone fell between my knees, the image still burning into the screen. Everything hurt. Not just the hurt of being alone, but the raw ache of being erased, of being told I no longer mattered. Not on Christmas, not ever. But as the ache spread, a different feeling took form, like a spark in dry wood. Determination. A fierce little flame that said, "This does not get to define me." I remembered nights sitting by my husband's bedside, days squeezing school books between diaper changes, Afternoons spent visiting my mother-in-law in hospitals. Nights falling asleep with whispered prayers. I had been there for everyone, so I decided I would be there for myself. With effort, I lifted that phone and stared at the photo again. My thumb hovered over the reply icon. Images flashed, my face at his birth, at graduations, at holidays, at prayers. My life threaded into theirs like gold in tapestry. And that photo, that single frame of optics, trivialized all of it. I tapped the icon and my finger hovered. My heart thudded in my chest. I typed the words slowly. I am not invisible. Then I typed another line. I will not be silent anymore. I paused, took a breath. Then I hit send. The message went out with no snark, no anger in text, only truth. No theatrics, just a moment of clarity. And with that, everything shifted. I set the phone down, sat up. The ache was still there, but it began to change, softening into resolve. I felt a stirring in my bones, a slow burn of purpose. They had sent a message. I was sending mine back. I stood, ready for whatever came next, because I was done watching. I was done waiting. Tonight, another story began. The one where I found my voice again. My thumb hovered, then tapped send. I did not press delete. I pressed send. I would not let that photo dim my light. I would not let their betrayal be the end. For the first time, I wasn't just the mother no one acknowledged. I was the mother who spoke and would be heard. I dialed the number for Edna on a whim the next morning, the Instagram photo from Hawaii still burning in my mind. We had only met once, years ago, before Rachel came into the picture. A frail woman at my son's wedding, leaning on a cane, her eyes glistening as she watched her daughter salute. I remembered a kind face touched by illness, not entitlement. A woman who had silently carried loyal devotion too long without fanfare. When Edna answered, her voice quivered. I heard the low hum of medical equipment, a TV in the distance, the shuffle of bedding. I recognized that loneliness. I said her name softly. Edna? Are you in Hawaii with them? She paused. The background noises fell quiet. No, I'm in a nursing home. Her voice cracked. I closed my eyes. I never expected gratitude. I only hoped for honesty. I saw the photos. They're not in Hawaii for you. A brittle laugh. I knew it was strange. Rachel said she needed to be there, but this feels like they wanted to save face. They wanted a picture, not to help me. My throat constricted at her words. She had been set aside too, dismissed with a photograph instead of a visit. We shared confession after confession, my heartbreak, her disappointment in the daughter, the emptiness at holidays, the stale smell of institutional sheets, the ache of being set aside for convenience, for optics, for nothing at all. By the end of the call, we were two mothers who had loved and lost in the same breath, those beloved ones who thought our age meant our voices no longer mattered. I felt a fierce bond form, a fragile, vulnerable alliance born of betrayal and shared sorrow. I leaned on the counter in my kitchen, the phone warm against my cheek, imagining her in that sterile room. I realized this was not just about Christmas neglect. It was years of neglect, innumerable sacrifices, overlooked contributions, ignored anniversaries. Then an idea came, like wildfire across dead grass. What if we reclaimed not only our dignity but our legacy? What if we built something together that no Instagram photo could erase? I proposed forming a foundation, a legal trust, dedicated to supporting the elderly who had been forgotten or left behind. I offered to share my savings stored for their inheritance. Edna, with the same determination that had cared for a funeral home's worth of widows and widowers, agreed. We pledged. No lawsuits, no revenge. Only justice. Only rebuilding our names and ours alone. We would not be erased from history or from hearts. There must be paperwork, she whispered. We need a lawyer. I know one. He helped me with my husband's will. He's discreet. There was a long silence. Then Edna said, I don't want them pitying me. I want them to see us. Her words were flame and steel. We mapped our plan over the next 2 days. Write new wills, establish the Legacy of Two Mothers Foundation, define the mission, secure the initial funds. We set up a single dramatic act the day of the Christmas live stream to finalize everything. Then we would watch it unfold. We both pressed our palms around the phone, the faint digital line bridging miles and memories. I said, "We will not let them delete our names." And Edna answered, her voice firm, despite tears, "Not ever again." In that moment, I felt something bloom within me, not malice, but something sharper and more grounded. Purpose. Two hands miles apart, meeting through the telephone line. Two hearts folding their strength together, and the silent vow, we will ensure we are not forgotten. We will ensure they remember us. We hung up. The room felt colder, but I lit a candle anyway. Our candle. And in the glow, I knew the rest of this story had already begun. I visited the lawyer's office early the next week, entering through a side door so no one from my family would recognize me. I carried only a small folder with documents and 2 pens. I had chosen this attorney because he knew discretion. He'd helped me once before, quietly and professionally. Now, I needed his help again. We sat in a quiet paneled room. He listened as I laid out our plan. "I'm setting up a foundation, Legacy of Two Mothers Foundation, to support elderly people who have been forgotten. I want to use the assets that would have gone to my son and daughter-in-law. They walked away from me. I'm walking away from giving them any share." He nodded and asked for the specifics. I told him which pieces of property I owned, which investments, everything in my name. He made notes, confirming details. "And you also want to exclude your son, daughter-in-law, and anyone else who abandoned you or fails to support the elderly?" he asked. "Yes," I said, voice steady. "Anyone who shows no heart for the aged or desert their parents on holidays." He paused. "That's a strong provision. Do you want to make that criteria precise or broad?" I straightened. "I want it clear. Anyone who fails to see their mother or father or mistreats them loses any claim." He nodded, typing on his laptop. "Understood." Then he guided me through the process, creating the foundation as a nonprofit, drafting the mission statement and board members list, which would include myself, Edna, and a trusted neighbor. He rehearsed each section of the will with me, naming legal trustees, outlining powers to manage the assets, a letter to the future executor, and the personal clause excluding family who betrayed their parents. Every phrase was deliberate. Finally came the key moment. We signed the 2-page legal declaration, a living will, trust creation, the lot. I held the pen in my hand, the weight of decision heavy but satisfying. I looked at the signature line. My name, clearly printed. I signed it, across years of quiet obedience and unremarked presence. Then Edna signed her portion over a tiny video call set up on a tablet. I watched her sign with trembling hands and then a firm and final press of her initials. We shared a long look through the screen, both overcome by a noble stillness. "Tomorrow," I said, "we go public." I left the office feeling lighter than I had in years. The decision was irreversible. The assets were no longer simply mine. They belonged to something larger, something meaningful. Walking out, I could almost hear my mother's voice, "Make your life count." She had raised 6 children on a schoolteacher's salary. I'd spent her life teaching values. Now I was putting those values into action. That night, I called Edna. She answered, voice thick with emotion. "Do you feel different?" I closed my eyes. "Freer," I said. "I gave our legacy back to us." She laughed softly. "They will know." "Yes," I agreed. "And so will we." I signed. I sealed. I reclaimed my story. I woke early on the day the Instagram post from Hawaii had gone live exactly 1 week ago. I dressed carefully in a navy sweater and pearls, simple and quiet, but not invisible. Across town, Edna did the same, slipping her phone into her blouse pocket. At 10 o'clock I.m. sharp, I clicked the link to the private Zoom room. Edna's face appeared in a small window, her expression solemn but determined. Next, our attorney appeared in a crisp suit, his desk neatly arranged, legal documents, pens, a small pair of scissors for the ribbon cutting, and a ceremonial pen engraved with the foundation name. The live stream began without fanfare. A banner slid across the top of the screen. BMI left us out. We left them off. The photo from Hawaii hovered in the background, subtle, haunting, undeniable. The lawyer cleared his throat, then spoke. "Good morning. On behalf of Miss Greenwood and Miss Edna Harper, we are here today to officially sign the legal documents establishing the Legacy of Two Mothers Foundation. This foundation's mission is to support elderly individuals who have been neglected or marginalized, with initial funding from the assets of our founders. He turned to me first. I picked up the engraved pen. My fingers felt heavy at first, but I pressed it to the line marked Founder, Mary Greenwood. I signed. Then I passed the pen to Edna, who signed in her own handwriting, Founder, Edna Harper. The lawyer then said, "We will now proceed with the ribbon-cutting ceremony." He handed me tiny ceremonial scissors and a blue ribbon. I snipped one end. Edna cut the other end on her screen. The lawyer launched a pre-prepared slideshow, documents dissolving from private accounts to legacy of Two Mothers Foundation. Then came the financial transfer. The lawyer turned the screen to display transaction confirmation numbers, showing the assets leaving residential property accounts and moving into the foundation's bank. I watched, heart pounding, and they transferred, clean, irreversible. Then the live stream opened to comments. I scrolled the feed as neighbors and friends joined. "Standing with you, Mary, such courage. Edna Harper. So happy to see justice. This is more beautiful than any Christmas present." The lawyer closed his laptop with soft ceremony. "Ladies, this is official. The foundation is legally active. Thank you for your trust." Edna and I exchanged smiles. I realized my eyes were wet with relief, not sorrow, but pride. We had turned heartbreak into action and abandonment into legacy. We said our last words. "Me. To every person who felt unseen, you matter. Edna. And you belong." The screen faded to our foundation logo, two interlocking mother figures embraced in a heart. In that quiet but powerful live stream, two women who had been cast aside stood shoulder to shoulder, reclaiming their stories. The chat overflowed with encouragement and awe. We didn't need applause, we needed acknowledgement. We had it. After the live stream, I closed my laptop and sat back. The house was silent. On the mantel, the Norwegian spruce flickered with reflected glory. Today, it would hold more meaning than any holiday lights before it. Today, they would see our truth, not a photograph in Hawaii, but a legacy built from love, sacrifice, and quiet power. And the world witnessed it with us. I heard the car doors shut in the driveway, long after dark, but the house was no longer empty. Its walls seemed to hum with anticipation. I waited in the living room, Edna's voice still echoing in my memory. "You will know we are seen." I had lit a single lamp and settled into the armchair. My pulse was steady, but I felt its presence, a quiet drumbeat of expectancy. They entered without ceremony. Daniel's coat thudded against the wooden hanger. Rachel slipped the key back into its bowl. Their children, Sophie and Eli, hovered at the threshold with nervous eyes. For a moment, no one moved, until Sophie's gaze found the new sign beside the fireplace. "Legacy of Two Mothers Foundation, elegant script on a gold plaque," she gasped. Eli peered over her shoulder. Daniel and Rachel exchanged a sharp look, that same look of surprise, confusion, disbelief. I rose slowly and crossed to stand before the plaque. Daniel's voice trembled, small. "Mom, what is all this?" Behind him, Rachel's footsteps came forward. The silence between us was thick, full of questions waiting to be asked. He swallowed hard. "Mom, Rachel, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. We thought." I raised a hand, gently stopping the apology before it could unravel further. "Let me show you." I led them into my study, opened the drawer, and pulled out the legal folder. They watched as I flipped through photocopies. The deed of the foundation, the banking transfer statements, the public charity registration, even the live stream screenshot. Daniel's shoulders sagged as the pieces fell in place. Rachel pointed at a signed image. Is this real?" I nodded. We followed through. We built it, not out of anger, but out of certainty. Certainty that mothers deserve more than a photo and an excuse. Rachel swallowed, tears streaking her cheeks. "Why, Moses, why would you do this?" she asked, voice small. I stepped closer. My voice was calm, not cold, but resolute. "Daniel, Rachel, we didn't do this to hurt you. We did this because every sacrifice we made, every patient night and worn-out dollar, was never just for you. It was for people like Edna and people like me who believed in family until realizing family didn't always believe back." Daniel sank to his knees in front of me, embroiled. My heart cracked, but I didn't flinch. "I betrayed you. I was wrong. Rachel sank to her knees too, but beside Daniel, she reached for Daniel's hand. Their children remained silent in the doorway, eyes wide. I knelt too, framing them in my arms. We did not use your mistakes against you. We used them to redefine our legacy. Edna entered quietly from the hallway. She came to stand behind me, hands resting on my shoulders. Her voice was steady. Don't ever think that two mothers cannot teach a lesson. We were invisible until we weren't. Rachel's voice cracked. But why us? I ruffled Sophie's hair. Because when you left without warning, when you replaced us with a picture, you reminded us how fragile love can be. Daniel buried his face into my coat. I'm so ashamed. Edna knelt on the other side. We're not here to punish. We're here to ensure no mother ever feels erased again. Rachel began to weep openly. Daniel echoed. Their remorse filled the room, warmed the corners that had grown cold. I stood and nodded to our foundation plaque. If you are willing to find us again, we are still here. They remained kneeling, eyes brimming. Outside, the clock ticked toward midnight. The house felt suddenly full, not of people, but of love rediscovered, lessons learned, hearts unbroken. And in that quiet reconciliation, I knew we had moved beyond betrayal. We had reclaimed something greater, our own truth, our own legacy, and the hope that even broken families can build something stronger together. Remember the morning the Legacy of Two Mothers Foundation trustee office finally flung its doors open to the community. A ribbon danced in the mild Georgia breeze, and the faces that gathered, lined with years of living and longing, were my true inauguration crowd. It felt like home, but grander, shaped by hope. Inside there were long tables stocked with warm casseroles, fresh oranges, and homemade tea. Volunteers welcomed guests with gentle smiles. Men and women from my neighborhood, some stooped, some alone, arrived with cautious curiosity. By the afternoon, I watched as they laughed over biscuits, shared memories, and tapped their toes to a volunteer's piano rendition of My Wild Irish Rose. Edna and I took turns at the front of the room, offering brief words on the mission: emotional care, health advocacy, community, and remembrance. But most of the day belonged to the people we were meant to serve, to those who needed not pity, but kindness, and, most of all, to people who needed to remember they mattered. Outside, a local news crew recorded the scene. The reporter spoke in measured tones. Today, two Georgian mothers, who were once overlooked by their own families, have come together to launch a foundation dedicated to supporting elderly individuals who have been neglected, offering companionship, healthcare support, and community at every age. The camera panned over smiling faces and warm handshakes. I saw Edna glance at me, and our eyes reflected the unspoken truth. Our legacy was not fluff or token. It was substance, real substance. Later in the week, I spent afternoons in the craft room lined with vintage sewing machines. Women who had once folded under the weight of loneliness now learned embroidery, quilting, flower arranging. We took turns guiding them, sharing stories of our own struggles, my husband's final days, Edna's nights in cold hospital rooms. In return, they offered laughter, colors, history, friendship. It was a circle of renewal I never thought possible in my last years. One afternoon, a plumber's grandson wandered in, shy and curious, watching me thread a needle for a volunteer. I paused and offered him a needle and ribbon. He looked at me, puzzled. I smiled and said, "We don't need our own grandchildren's affection. We need each other." It was his turn to smile then. He nodded, as if he understood something better than I ever could have hoped. In the months that followed, the foundation grew. Elderly residents came for warm meals, doctor checkups, workshop classes, and the rare luxury of simply being seen. Word spread through churches and senior centers and local bulletins. Our town rallied. I received letters. "Mrs. Greenwood, thank you for giving me something I thought I had lost, a place to belong. We call you Mother now, not because you gave us money, but because you gave us dignity." One evening, as fall light filtered through windows, Edna and I sat on the front porch swing, sipping iced tea. The fading sun caught her silver hair, highlighting the resilience in her face. She said softly, "Who would have thought, Mary, two mothers, united by hurt, building something lasting?" I squeezed her hand. "They thought we were just old ladies, Edna, but our purpose, that made us dangerous." She laughed quietly, a laugh rich with relief and triumph. Some mornings, I still wake up and hear that Christmas Eve moment, the slam of a door, the sting of those words, the absence. But now, I see it was not my undoing. It was my turning point. I stand in the community hall, teaching young volunteers the joy of kindness, the rhythm of compassion. I look at the gray-haired hands stitching comfort, the bright eyes rediscovering laughter, and I say to them, "We don't need family to give us value, we need each other." They nod, gently patting my shoulder, and for the first time, I believe it with my whole heart. Our aftermath wasn't bitterness, it was blessing. Our legacy wasn't what was taken from us, it was what we created from it. Two mothers once ignored have now built a refuge that stands firm, that welcomes life and offers it back to those who had little else. We were once counted out, now we count people in. That is our inheritance, and it will echo beyond lifetimes. I never expected the winter after we launched the foundation to be so full of warmth. Snow drifted over the fields in soft white blankets, but inside our center, laughter crackled like a hearth. Edna and I reveled in the bustle, volunteers greeting newcomers, meals being served, calls being answered, elderly hands being held, yet our attention kept drifting back to a hush that eventually fell over us both one frosty evening. Our son Daniel and Rachel had asked to come see us. I had received the message through our lawyer. They will come, they want to talk, do not leave. It pinged on my phone, and I swallowed a mix of dread and resolve. We had asked no apology, we demanded no restitution. We only requested recognition and closure if that was what they sought. Now here they were, stepping into the sunlit foyer, their coats locked awkwardly behind them. The children stayed with a volunteer. It was just the four adults on the polished wood floor. It was Rachel who spoke first, voice trembling. "I don't know where to begin." Daniel's eyes were red-rimmed. He shifted uncomfortably on his feet, back straight but shoulders slumped. He whispered, "Mom, Rachel, I can't change what we did, but I want to understand what we lost." I watched their faces with a gentle firmness. They looked small here, not lost in an elegant beach resort, but standing in the quiet power of their mother's choices. I stepped forward and gestured toward a display near the entrance, photos of elders smiling at the center's ribbon cutting, snapshots of quilting classes, meals shared as if for a family holiday. I said, "This is what we did with the missing Christmases, the abandoned birthdays, the forgotten calls. With every hour you chose to be elsewhere, we chose to build this." Rachel gasped, eyes drawn to a framed photo of Edna kneeling beside a woman showing off her first quilt. Tears spilled. She whispered, "That's Mrs. Lorraine. She hasn't spoken since her husband died, until we came here." The room that held so much purpose shuddered in place. Daniel stepped forward, voice thick. "Mom, we're sorry. We thought we were doing right. We thought Hawaii would show love." I waited the moment, breathing steady, watching his sorrow. "Love is not measured in pictures," I replied softly. "It's measured in presence and action." He blinked. "I see that now." Rachel took a tentative step toward me. I can't undo it, but I want to help. I want my children to know their grandparents better than we did." I glanced at Edna, who nodded slowly. "Then you start by being here." A few days later, Daniel and Rachel approached us with a proposal to help at the center, not as apologies, but as participants, cooking, serving, learning, listening. The children visited too. They came to story time, shared crafts, sat quietly beside emotional strangers. At first it was awkward, harvest tables of wiping tears and comfort, but slowly warmth spread again. Daniel learned Mrs. Lorraine's favorite recipes. Rachel discovered that sewing brought peace to her mind. The children poured juice to new friends. I watched them, hearts softening, not because they repented, but because they chose differently now. Because vulnerability is a form of courage. A month later, at an evening event, the doors opened to welcome a local news outlet back. The piece would focus not only on the mother's story, but also on the ripple effect, a family in recovery, and a community now stronger because of their presence. The reporter filmed Daniel and Rachel, working alongside volunteers, laughing with Edna, even helping sweep the foyer before the evening meal. On camera, Daniel choked his words out. "My mom didn't deserve the treatment she received. We made a mistake. Instead of abandoning her, we built walls, Now we're trying to tear them down. Rachel, wiping a tear from her sleeve, finished. This place is changing us. It's changing our family. We want to be part of that change. This segment aired on local TV and circulated on social media. I watched it, chest tight. I thought of my younger self, the woman who baked pie alone on Christmas, and I smiled, because I saw how far we had come. In the weeks that followed, more volunteers joined. Other families came forward, sharing similar regrets and hoping they could bridge gaps in their own lives. The center hummed with possibility. One afternoon, Edna and I sat on the front porch benches beside a window overlooking the Mississippi-tinted creek that bordered our land. She pointed to the children playing inside. "They're part of it now," she said softly. I nodded. "They're part of us." She placed her hand over mine. "And you know what, Mary?" I waited. "Be my will not forget. Not now." 3 months after their return, on a mild spring afternoon, Daniel and Rachel approached me with a small gift packet. Inside was a keychain and a handwritten letter. I unfolded the note. "Mom, we don't know if you'll ever forgive us, but we hope you accept this, our own contribution to Legacy of Two Mothers. We want to give back in your name." In that moment I realized they had moved from beneficiaries to believers. They had recognized my value, not as blood on paper, but as love in action. My eyes stung, my voice caught. I slipped the letter into my pocket, nodded at Daniel and Rachel, and then said, "Your place at this table was never lost. You only needed to find it again." They nodded, tears streaming, children leaning in. That summer, the foundation hosted an evening concert fundraiser on the creekside lawn. String lights shone over cross-legged elders and children. I stood beside Edna near the front, watching the families mingle. Daniel guided a nervous volunteer through the music lineup. Rachel helped pass out snacks. Sophie and Eli danced with other kids. The band started, a classic Southern folk song that carried the scent of childhood Sunday afternoons and open porches. I sighed. My life had taken me far from expectations, through heartbreak, through social exile, toward a different kind of purpose. Could anything right the past? Perhaps not completely, but the present, our living present, could be a canvas of choice. I nudged Edna. "Look at them." She took a slow breath. "We taught them better. Beyond suppositions and social pictures, we joined hands and together hummed along to the tune, knowing that this night and nights like it was a living testament. Nothing is too small to restore a bond. We had proven that a photo can lie, but a life of service speaks truths across hearts and generations." Sitting in my garden years later, I'm often asked what legacy means. I think of that ribbon cutting, that live broadcast, that broken Thanksgiving table. I think of the heartbreak we transformed into service, and I smile. I tell them, legacy is not what they took from you, but what you did with what they left behind. The center still stands, the wreath lights still flicker, the laughter still fills the halls. Every family who comes through is greeted by volunteers who learned here and want to give back. 2 women, once dismissed, have become the heart of something far bigger than themselves. Daniel and Rachel raised their children there. They teach lessons I never had to teach them. The quiet work of showing up, the healing that comes when you're truly present. We closed the loop. In the end, the strongest gift was not money or property. It was a living, breathing family that chose to rebuild rather than walk away. It was a community that saw 2 mothers and saw power in their love. It was a promise to every elder, you are not invisible. So no, we did not just get over their Hawaii trip, we transformed it by using the hurt as starting fuel. When I reflect on my journey, I realize we wrote a story stronger than any betrayal. We created sanctuary out of absence, dignity out of abandonment, meaning out of emptiness. And it was our greatest gift. They thought we were just old ladies. So we became their greatest lesson. They abandoned us on Christmas, but found their way back to love. They sent us cold photos, but we returned warmth for the world to see. Thank you for witnessing our story. If you believe that no one should feel invisible because of age or abandonment, please subscribe to Grandma, True Stories. Join our journey, where real grandmas share real strength, and every voice counts.